Hi, I'm Cameron, and I don't just read comics, I love them. Welcome back to another episode of Cameron Reads Comics. Today, I'm going to be talking about Daredevil Season 2 and my review of it. So, I knew going into this season that it was my favorite of the three. So, I always knew that it was going to be excellent, and if I'm honest, this show did not disappoint. One of the most important things I think I could say is that Season 2 is like finally I think what I want this show what I wanted the show to be all along. As much as I love the Man Without Fear costume, which is just, the bandana over the eyes, I want like Daredevil to be Daredevil. I want him in the suit, and they finally gave us this like full-bodied Matt Murdock Daredevil, and that's even how they open up the season, which is what I wanted. It's actually super important to say that this season is based on also my favorite run of Daredevil of all time. Season 1 is based on Man Without Fear. Season 2 is actually based on the Frank Miller Elektra run in the 1980s. And then Season 3 is pretty much based off of Daredevil Born Again. This one is based on like my absolute favorite run though. My favorite comic series of all time. And so I'm definitely going to be more prone to that than anything else. I'll always tell people to pick up Frank Miller's Daredevil run with the first appearance of Elektra, which is issue 168. Because in a lot of the collected editions, I have like the Daredevil Omnibus. In a lot of the collected editions, what they do is they'll give you Frank Miller's run, but they'll start the run with like, I think Roger McKenzie is writing it and Frank Miller's on the art. And like, yeah, he's technically on Daredevil and part of the storytelling team, but he's not telling the stories he wanted to tell. And I always say that the run always picks up at 168, which is the first appearance of Elektra, and that's when Frank Miller's like narrative really gets going, which I believe leads into my favorite issue. Man, they're all so good, but I think my top 3 issues are probably, I don't know my 3, but Daredevil 181 is my favorite of all time. So that should give you some context. Death of Elektra. Number 2 is Daredevil 169, which I found to be like the most impressive. It's Bullseye. It's pretty much the issue after Elektra's first appearance. Bullseye goes crazy and it's amazing. So I love that issue. Now for the story in this season of Daredevil, let's talk about the characters. First character I want to talk about, obviously, Matt Murdock, Daredevil himself. I like that it talks about how it's the cost of being Daredevil is weighing on Matt's life. But the point that I love is that in this season, Matt is full-fledged, like choosing to be Daredevil, which is awesome because as much as I love the reluctant hero story, we saw a lot of that in season 1. And then you'll see a lot of that in season 3. But Daredevil season 2, Matt is choosing this lifestyle for himself, but at the cost of putting everything else, his career, his friendships, his relationships on the back burner. He doesn't think he's making a difference in the law. He doesn't think he's making a difference in anything else except by being Daredevil. Which is like, we see those choices affect him later. Next we have Foggy and Karen. Foggy becomes the better lawyer in this season. He takes the reins of the Murdock and Nelson, or Nelson and Murdock attorneys at law moniker. He takes full transparency, and I think he becomes the better lawyer of the two, which I think in any good Daredevil story is the case. I think Matt Murdock wins cases because he's Matt Murdock and he's blind. I think Foggy wins them because he's a really great lawyer, and we see that in this season because Matt's not being present. He's busy with Elektra fighting the Hand. Foggy is the one defending John Bernthal's Punisher, which we'll talk about in one of my favorite moments of all time. I'm so glad that we saw this part in Foggy, and I think that you see the weight. They play into the weight of the implications on Foggy because Matt chooses to be Daredevil. He has to pick up Matt's slack in Nelson and Murdock, and he really amazingly defends and chooses to take on Frank Castle, which was so interesting. Him defending the Punisher, that whole sequence was like my favorite part of the whole season, if I'm being honest. We also see Karen make a character transition in a way that I don't think we've seen her do in the comics. I haven't read enough Karen Page comics. I think for her to affect my view of the story. So if I'm being totally honest, a lot of my idea of Karen Page is informed by the show, because in the comics, Karen dies, and I don't really think that's going to happen in the series. I don't know if they'll go that far with it, but Karen dies in the comics, and she. All I see her as, is like what happens in Daredevil Yellow, or like they look at hindsight, like where is Karen now, or like something like Daredevil Born Again, which is like what, like we see Karen this season go in a direction that I never thought we'd see her go, which is she takes up the mantle of Ben Urich. She kind of works for the paper that he worked for, which is really neat. And we also see that she's not helpless in this season, which is awesome. So we also see a little bit of romance between her and Matt is in a bit of a love triangle, which is nice to see because he is a womanizer. And not to say that Karen is just another object of his desire, because obviously she's been proven to be so much more than that. But it's to show that like there's a spirit of, there's romance between her and Matt, which is good to see. But he's also being pulled in other directions, a lot of femme fatales in his life. I actually want to give a big shout out to Karen in this season, because Vincent D'Onofrio has always talked about how Deborah Ann Wool, who plays Karen, she has reinvented that character, and I really think that we kind of see that in this series. I think the depth that she has given, also her and the writing team, the depth that she has given Karen has been amazing to see, and I do think I noticed that in this season more than ever. She's not helpless, she's not a damsel in distress. She's an equal threat, as is Foggy, as is Matt. Matt's the biggest threat, obviously. Next, we have Frank Castle, the Punisher, played by John Bernthal. Obviously the standout of this season, to the point where he got his own series after this, 2 seasons of his own series, The Punisher. Of all characters in the Netflix universe to be carried over to the MCU, I think we will see John Bernthal's Punisher. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I think that his performance kind of speaks for itself. Attaching words to what he did with this character, he was really incredible. And I credit where credit's due for his portrayal of the Punisher. I think the season actually goes downhill after after they kind of fade out on his arc and they kind of leave it to Matt in the Hand. I think it was the strongest when, I don't know how they were able to make Punisher's arc work on top of Matt's. There's the culmination of the courthouse scene and everything going on in Matt's life, and then the Punisher being on the stand, and that whole sequence was just amazing. And seeing John Bernthal's Punisher play against Vince D'Onofrio's Kingpin, literally just exceptional. There's not much more I can say about it other than like it was like chef's kiss good. Again, obviously the standout. But I do want to talk about someone who I think is the most underrated in this season. And if we were to see them return, I want to see more than anyone else, I think, is Elodie Young's Elektra. I thought she was just mesmerizing. And I'm so glad, she's a French actress, and to see her return was just amazing. Like, not her return, but to see her portrayal of this character that is so mesmerizing. She's such, that's who I picture Elektra as. Like, everything she did with that character was, I just thought, pitch perfect. I think some of the writing didn't do her as much justice, but Elodie Young picked up the slack. Watching her history with Matt Murdock and then watching her be able to, catch him off guard was amazing. And I think that everyone gets a lot of credit for this season, but I think that she should get equal nods. I think her portrayal of Elektra was as good as Vince D'Onofrio's Kingpin and John Bernthal's Punisher and Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock. And I stand by that. Two other characters we kind of saw briefly, but we saw their narratives intertwine a little bit more, were Vince D'Onofrio's Kingpin and Stick. It was cool to see how these parts of Matt's past have now come back in to affect his present through Stick, through Elektra. And I didn't realize in the first season, but this was really the season to introduce the Hand, which are, the ninja cult that become a main antagonist. It's pretty much Kingpin and the Hand are the main antagonists of Matt Murdock's life. Yeah, there's Leland Owlsley. Yeah, there's Stiltman. Yeah, there's Gladiator. But really, I guess there's Typhoid Mary too, but we see her later down the road in Iron Fist. But, you don't see much. So it was good to finally see full force. And the return of Nobu. I gotta say, the first 3 episodes of this season were so freaking good, and like those were the ones that really got me. Got to me. It was the rooftop. It's not a monologue; it's a dialogue. The rooftop scene where Daredevil's tied up with Frank Castle as the Punisher, them debating their philosophies. Exactly what we needed. It was the most perfect thing in the world, and you can see how entirely different, but also how completely similar Matt Murdock's Daredevil and Frank Castle's Punisher are. Man, that was an awesome scene. And like, this is the thing. I think I've seen this season. This is my 3rd time watching it. I've seen it, 3 times through already, or it's my 3rd time. And it's still just like, it's not, this show is either as good as you remember or if not better. And that is just so great to see. The culmination that everything happened in this season was brilliant. And the season ends with the death of Elektra. Now, this is actually what I would say is a con of the season, because my personal philosophy is that I think they're trying to set Nobu. They tried to set Nobu up to be this major threat to Matt, and like, yeah, he is, and yeah, Nobu's scary, and like we saw the gnarliest bloody fight that they ever had. But I never thought Nobu was as menacing as Benjamin Poindexter's Bullseye. And so, that being the case, I think Ben Poindexter is. I think Bullseye is like my favorite comic book villain of all time, because I just think there's an element. I think Joker is like cool, but I think he has like the psyche, the mental stability of the Joker, but like then having the assassination ability that he has on top of all of it is just terrifying. I just think he's terrifying. Anything in his hands is a weapon. Nobu is not Daredevil's greatest villain. I think maybe they're trying to set that up in the season, but like I feel like if anything, maybe Elektra should have died at Fisk's hands, and so that's a con for me. I'm glad it kind of ended with the death of Elektra, and the next thing technically, I guess that would be in order, would be something closer to the Defenders, which I'm not watching yet. I don't have any interest in watching. That being the case, I wish we could have seen a little bit more of that. But anyways. My other con is and it's to the credit of the show, they tried to cram a lot into this season. This arc in the comics happened at least so Daredevil 168 through 181, what's that, 13 issues? And they tried, they didn't recreate every single issue of the series, obviously. And for pacing and a lot of other factors, they weren't able to do it. And that's okay, but I just think they tried to cram a lot into the 13 episodes, which almost made some of the beats hit less hard than they could have, like I said about the Frank Castle arc. And now we are going to the rating. It shouldn't surprise you. Upon hindsight, again, I think this is the Daredevil season that I wanted the show to be all along. And I don't think that, upon hindsight too, I think as I was watching it, I was like, oh, like the end didn't hit as hard as it could have. But upon hindsight, man, my rating on my notes is now changing in my head after having talked about it. I think I give this series a 9.5 out of 10. It's what I wanted it to be. And I absolutely adore it. Again, I think I'll say that this season is better than any Disney Plus show that I've seen so far. I want to be pleasantly surprised. Tell me your favorite moment from Daredevil Season 2 in the comments. Make sure to clobber those like and subscribe buttons. I'm Cameron. I don't just read comics. I love them. Maybe go check out my podcast too. See you next time.